Welcome to Your School Journey, where we dive into the topics that matter in education today. We're here to help parents understand the conversations happening in schools and offer tips to support your child's learning along the way.
Thanks for joining us again on the Your School Journey podcast. On today's episode, we want to take a deeper dive into something we often take for granted. How do we actually learn to read? From the junior school at Emmanuel College, our guests today are Jeremy Cook, Director of Learning and Teaching, and Carla Stanley, a passionate early years teacher and Director of Pastoral Care. Thanks so much for joining us today, Carla and Jeremy.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having us.
Excited to be here.
Well, let's get straight into it. You guys are super passionate about this, but why are you so passionate about reading in the early years, and what's been happening in the teaching of reading over the last few years?
Why are we so passionate about reading?
Yeah.
And that is because as a child, I struggled to read. I'm not dyslexic. I had parents who read to me all the time, but for me, finding a book that piqued my interest as a child that was really busy was difficult. And it wasn't until I hit grade 3 when my teacher brought this brand new book into the classroom, and she told us that we could all borrow it once throughout the year for 1 week, and we had to read it in that week. And then it had to come back, that I actually found something that I enjoyed, and that was Fantastic Mr. Fox. And when I started my teaching journey, I started in grade 3 as well. And so when I began teaching, the first thing I did was go to the library, get a book that I thought my students would enjoy, and then that was the start of my teaching journey. I read every single day with an aim to try and pinpoint that child who just wasn't engaged and get them to a point where they actually wanted to hear a story, so that they saw the value in stories and the value in books, so that they would then feel inspired to go and borrow a book for themselves and engage in reading at home. And generally, it's been successful. The only problem with that, though, I wasn't necessarily teaching children how to read. It was more that I was inspiring them to engage with literature instead.
Yeah, so you're instilling a love of reading, which is part of what we're talking about today. For me, my interest in reading and the reason that I'm so interested in early literacy and teaching children to read is just because I have loved reading forever. It is something that I didn't find too tricky when I was younger. It was an outlet for me, and I just love the magic of books. And so, like Jeremy, I just love inspiring kids to read, and obviously they need to learn the skills first before they can get right into it like that. And so, Mal, you asked what has changed over the past few years. And to be honest, as far as teaching reading goes, the changes have been quite significant, but it's almost like we've come somewhat full circle back to the way that reading was taught a long time ago. Because when I first started teaching, there was a whole range of strategies. I had a bunch of posters in my Year 2 classroom with all of these, and they were called reading strategies for kids. And some of them were about predicting, and some of them were about using the picture as a cue or a clue to what they were reading. Some of them were about skipping a word if you don't know what it is, and you'll figure it out as you go. Now, all of those are strategies that come in handy later in the reading journey. They help with comprehension, but there is a lot of research at the moment and in recent years about the science of reading. And the science of reading actually has 5 pillars, and the initial pillars that kind of act like a stepping stone towards all of those later strategies are very, very simple. And it's just that our kids need to know what sound each letter makes. And in doing that, they can then start to decode words, start to decode sentences, and get into their reading. So we have a really strong focus now. Instead of let's use a range of strategies to teach kids how to read, the initial stages of reading is all based on what we call phonemic awareness and phonics. And in a nutshell, that is that children know what sounds the letters make.
So the two of you just earlier on have spoken about, one spoken about a struggle, one spoken about loving reading, and I imagine that is a nice picture for the whole of society. We've got people way along the spectrum, and I think sometimes we think learning to read is some kind of magic trick, that you're able to read all of a sudden and you don't know how. But can you unpack for us? It's not a magic trick. What is it exactly that you do in those early years that brings kids from not being able to read at all to suddenly able to read proficiently?
So I started my teaching career in year 2. So by the time children came into my classroom, they had the basics down. So we started and kids have kind of got what we call the basics and we were building on that. 4 years into my career, I was moved down into a prep classroom. Now, my husband had taught prep for a number of years by then, and I went home to him. And even after having a university degree and 4 years in the classroom, I went home to him. And my very first question after telling him that I was going to be teaching prep was, but how do you teach kids to read? Like, where do you start? They didn't tell us at uni, how do you start? What do you do? And so, there are those common myths of reading will come naturally. If you expose kids to books, they will just learn almost via osmosis. And there is some truth to those things. There is some truth to it will come. So here's the good news, saying that reading happens magically. We all know as grown-ups and parents and teachers that all magic tricks, there are just tricks. They don't really saw people in half and they don't really make people disappear. There's all steps in the process. And so if we're talking magic reading, there are all steps in the process. And that brings us back to the stepping stones or the 5 pillars that I mentioned earlier. And we're going to unpack those really quickly so that people listening can understand the why things have changed, and then we'll get into the how. And so the stepping stones to the magic trick that is reading. The first one is phonemic awareness. And that is really just the understanding for kids when they see a little symbol or a little squiggle on paper, they know that is a letter and that letter can make a sound or a range of sounds. So that's
or a group of letters.
Or a group of letters can make a sound. So they need to know, first of all, from the very base level, that is making a sound. That's something that can communicate with us because it's a symbol.
So what was that called again?
So that's phonemic awareness.
So phonemic awareness, if we hear those terms, we understand what that means. Brilliant.
Yeah, it's not what sound it does make. It's just the understanding that that is a symbol that's telling me something. Then we move on to phonics, and phonics is what we're really talking about heavily today because that is kind of the first step. Phonics is knowing what those sounds are. And knowing that there are different rules with sounds, that when 2 letters go together, they might make a different sound. And so once children have established what sounds a letter can make, that's when they're going to be starting to get on their way to the next few pillars, which we then go into reading with fluency, increasing vocabulary and understanding what they're reading. So that's the comprehension side of things. But mastering phonics and what we call decoding, knowing what sound the letter makes and so what word is actually being said or being read, that's the beginning step to reading. We can't skip over that. The comprehension is fed in. It's not we focus on phonics only, and when they get it, we'll move on to the next one. But phonics has to be the integral part of where we start, and then the comprehension, vocab, fluency feed into that. Would you say the same, Joe?
Yes, I agree. Absolutely.
And what challenges do you find students do run into when they are learning about this base level phonics and phonemic awareness? Do they start to struggle with certain things, or are they okay? They just move on through?
I think one of the biggest challenges that we probably have at this point is that there are a number of students that come into schools now who may not have even been exposed to literature before they've entered the classroom. And so coming into school, having never read a book with your parent at home before, becomes a little bit problematic when you're wanting to try and teach a child how to read, because all of a sudden it's not just that you're teaching them about words, you're teaching them about books and language in general. And so that's where we kind of need to make sure that we're fostering that love of reading at home by creating a rich learning environment in the home right from birth. And I've read to my children since birth. I think the day that we brought our oldest daughter home, I sat in a chair. She was a couple of weeks premature. I opened a book and I read it to her. And we've pretty much done the same thing ever since, and she's 11 now. And that's part of the reason I believe why she's such a passionate reader.
Yeah, I think for me as an educator, probably the biggest barrier that I come up against is, yes, like Jeremy, maybe there hasn't been the exposure to books that, so kids don't quite know how to manage it, or there's this preconception, whether it's through siblings or otherwise, but children have decided before we've even started that reading is hard. And it's really important as parents and grown-ups and teachers that we say, yeah, reading can be really tricky, but we're going to teach you things to make it easier. And like the same as any other skill, the more you practice, the easier it's going to get. And for some children, yeah, there's going to be learning difficulties. There's going to be, issues with working memory or things like that. It might be a little bit harder for some children, but with strategies in place, it is manageable. And kids need to know that reading is really cool and it is really enjoyable, and it won't, even when it is a little bit tricky, it won't be tricky forever.
So can I ask, what ages are the students, or maybe what grade levels are they as they go through each of these stages? Do they do this all at once, the phonics, phonemic awareness and all that, or are there particular ages that we track through as we are teaching them these things?
We start in prep. Right from the very beginning of their learning journey, they're being read to, but they are learning how to read as well. And we have a very strong phonics program. We're really fortunate at Emmanuel in that we have passionate educators in our early years classrooms who love the research. That we've got to remember that the science of reading is a package as well. It is research. It's not pedagogy, and pedagogy is how we teach. And so our teachers in prep and grade 1, they're developing pedagogy around the science of reading, and a lot of it has a phonics focus.
So we're talking kind of the early years of reading at the moment. So prep to grade 2 is what we're really kind of speaking about today, our emerging readers beginning to read. We are still absolutely teaching those comprehension skills, and we'll talk about in a moment some of the ways that this can be done at home, the way that it's done in the classroom, but we're still focusing on comprehension. We're still focusing on fluency through displaying through fluency when we read to our children. So they're exposed to all 5 pillars from the get-go, from prep, but our strong learn to read focus is on ensuring that they have a solid understanding of those sounds, so of the phonics. And so they do phonics and reading every day. And our children go to the library. We have library lessons, and they hear good reading of authentic texts and new vocabulary, so they're boosting their vocabulary. But as far as the teaching and the targeted teaching goes, we're starting from phonics.
If they don't understand this, or if they struggle with this, what do you feel it's so important that they get a hold of this and they grapple with this and actually learn this at this early stage in their learning journey?
Can we just say that whilst a child might struggle with it and they will grapple with it, we already know that that's going to occur. And the research actually says that this needs to be taught explicitly and frequently. And so we know that the curriculum states that by the end of the year, a child needs to have met the achievement standard. And so we've got that entire year to be able to present this teaching to our students. And all of our teachers, whether the child is competent or not, is revising and consolidating. And so students will struggle, but we've had a lot of success in our early years classrooms, especially in prep. With one classroom last year that had quite a few students who have got dyslexia, they've got the diagnosis, who have all demonstrated a good understanding of phonics and are able to read because, as the research says, they were taught explicitly and it was frequent as well.
And I guess it's super important that they get this right, because I'm a high school teacher, and I would understand the value of all my students being able to read and read fluently.
Reading
because
underpins everything that we do.
Yeah.
Every single key learning area relies on a student being able to read, whether it's maths, science, HAS, English, design, the arts. They need to be able to read. It is an important lifelong skill.
And obviously, if it's this important, then it's not just something that we deal with in the classroom. It's something that we really need to deal with at home. So you guys, I know, have already prepared a whole heap of strategies to share with our parent community through this podcast. Can you tell us what can we do at home to help our children, particularly our early years children, to consolidate their reading and to be able to flourish as they learn to read?
Yes, this is the exciting part, because this is what we do, and this is partly why we love it. And so we will just bounce back and forth at the moment with some different ideas. But the very first one that we prepared in advance is just about creating a literacy-rich environment that's really going to get kids interested and wanting to read with you. And so that means stocking up your books at home, whether you purchase them or you go to public libraries to find some resources or use your school library. In all of our public libraries, there are leveled readers and decodable readers. So it would be great to get some of those for your kids to have at home at the level that they're working at. Just as important, or even more important than that, is get some great books. Like Jeremy mentioned, grab a book that you as a child loved and read it with your kids. You don't need to borrow books at a level where you're hoping your child can read it with you or read it to you. There is just as much benefit in you reading to a child, because you're displaying all of those things that we want our children to learn. So get some really good books, model that reading behavior, and really start to ignite a bit of enjoyment for reading. So yeah, choose books that your child loves, choose books that you love, use your funny voices, act out scenes. I make puppets with my little boy, and he will do the puppets while I read to him, things like that.
I do all the voices.
The voices.
I've always been a voice person.
The voices are important. And see, and that's all modeling. That's all modeling to your child. And I bet, Mr. Cook, that your girls now also do voices.
Yes, one of them does. The other one not so much, but they certainly have been exposed to lots and lots of voices. And one of my favourite things as a teacher, especially when I was teaching year 2, was I'd always start with George's Marvelous Medicine, which one of my daughters is reading at the moment. And children at the very beginning of the year are trying to suss out who their teachers are. And the moment that George's grandmother speaks and you use the croaky grandma voice is the moment that I know that I've got them for the rest of the year. And I've done the same thing with my own children as well. They expect it. It's part of what makes reading fun. And, authors, especially like Roald Dahl or Andy Griffiths, are very, very good at putting such vibrant characterization into their stories that it's actually easy to do those things as well, and to act out the stories, and to make sure that your timing's really good when you're reading to your students or to your kids. Can I just add to what Carla was saying about the libraries? If you know that there is a book that you loved when you were younger, or there's a book that someone's talking about that you would like to read your child and you can't find it, the libraries are very good at sourcing those books for you. And they also have quite extensive e-libraries as well, where you can download those books for e-readers and things like that. That's
sensational, Jeremy and Carla. Are there any final tips that you can give to our parents, just as a quick rundown for them? And then we'll finish up today.
Yes, let me fly through, because we've said, joy of reading, model the reading, all of those things. But I'm very aware that we still haven't given some practical try this in these very early stages of reading. So few activities that parents might like to try. So when your children are just learning those letter sounds and they're building on their phonics knowledge and understanding, use what you have. Their toys will come in really handy. Use magnetic letters or Scrabble tiles, or make some flashcards at home and just practice the sounds or flip them over, and the first person to say it gets to keep that tile, something like that. Label different things around your house. See if they can decode the sounds for different things around the house. Something that kids are strangely excited about and love to do is either like cleaning off whiteboards. And so you may not have a whiteboard at home, but I assume that everyone has windows at home. Use a whiteboard marker on your windows, write different letters up there, and as your child says the sound or sounds that it makes, let them rub it off. Like they get to rub it off as they say it, and then, put 10 up there and see how quickly they can say them and rub them off, things like that. There's apps and there's tools that promote play with phonics. Obviously, we need to be really conscious of finding a good balance between screen time and concrete book time. But if your child is having some screen time anyway, why not use something like that? So there's lots of programs out there that can assist with that. And another one that I love, before I will let Jeremy take over, is just play games. There are games that you are probably already playing with your child that have to do with spelling and reading and sounds. I spy. Just change your wording when you play I spy. Instead of saying I spy with my eye, something beginning with C, use the sound. Say k. So they've got the sound in mind and they're looking. I spy, memory, scavenger hunt for something with a b sound in it. Just so that it's just that common, constant language and revision, and it's not sitting down to read together at all times.
That's so good, Carla. I really wish that I had labelled my spatula and kitchen utensils at home when I was teaching my kids to learn to read. Jeremy, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Yeah, just in terms of improving fluency, especially for children that are reluctant readers, read books to your children, reread those books to your children, and then do some choral reading with them as well. I find the Harry McClary series by Lindley Dodd really good for this. One, because she's got awesome vocab as well. And if you find a word that you're unsure of or that your child might not understand, don't dumb it down. Don't simplify it. Instead, discover together what that word actually means and try and incorporate that into your everyday language. But then what I like to do is I might read a page out of one of those books to my child, and then we read it together out loud so that we're rehearsing together. And it's not just about the child reading to me, but it's about me going on that journey with my child as they are learning to read as well. And that's really good for developing fluency, especially when you've got books that have lots of rhyming in them and there's rhythms that are associated with poems and rhyme as well.
Well, guys, this has been super informative, and there's so much in there that I had no idea about, that there was so much depth to actually learning to read, which has been amazing. So thank you so much for these practical ideas that you've shared to help our parents to set their kids up for success in their reading journey. Thanks again for sharing your experience with us.
Thank you.
Your School Journey is an initiative of Emmanuel College as part of our commitment to partner with parents in shaping the learning and growth of young people. This podcast is hosted by Mal Gaylor with audio production by John Eddy and executive produced by Dan Pearson. If you found this episode valuable, we'd love you to share it with other parents, subscribe for future episodes, and leave a review. You can also connect with us for more insights into education and to explore how Emmanuel College can support your child's learning journey.